Welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of our brand new podcast, Jesus Lead. I'm Melanie Schultz, the Director of Adult Discipleship here at Trinity Klein, and with me is...
I'm Pastor Gene Johnson, and I'm the pastor of adult discipleship here at Trinity Klein Lutheran Church and School.
Yeah, we're really excited to launch this podcast. Jesus Lead is the theme, and that's really the lens that we want to use for every topic that we explore. So we might be doing a book study here, some discussions there, but we're definitely going to be digging into Scripture. And for any topic that we're looking at, we're going to be looking at how Jesus would approach that topic based on his actions, his words, and his word, the Word of God. And so this being our first episode, we want to tell you a little bit about this season. This season, we're looking at emotionally healthy spirituality. We're going to be doing a book discussion. It's by Peter Scazzero, and each episode we'll be talking through one chapter of the book.
Yep.
And if you're interested, we would encourage you to buy the book.
Yes, get the book.
Get the book. It's going to be an excellent resource. There's plenty in here that you're going to want to go back to. We want you to read along with us. And there are some additional resources that are available at emotionallyhealthy.org. We're not getting paid for any of this. We're not plugging anything for that sake.
Should be, but no.
No. But there are some really great resources there, some assessments, and there's an entire course that you can do.
Yep.
So we encourage you to go ahead and check it out and see if there's some other things that you might be interested in looking at.
I'll even step in and say that you may not even be aware that there's actually a podcast as well.
Yes, they have their own podcast.
So it's Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. Peter Scazzero podcast, lots of it's a great podcast, so we plug that one as well.
Yeah. So tell me, this being our first season with this podcast,
Yep.
Why is this the first book? And because you're the one, Pastor Gene, you plugged this book. The first day I came on staff, you handed me this book.
I did, didn't I?
Yeah. So tell us why this book is got a special place for you.
Well, that's how much time do we have, right? This is a podcast. So this goes back probably a good 2 years ago. I couldn't pin down the exact date, but it's probably been at least 2 years. This is when actually Pastor John was still on staff here. And we were both sitting in different chairs, but I just remember I don't even know how I came across the resource, but just always looking for great resources out there that can be used for, just for discipleship.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how, I can't remember. Google search, whatnot, just looking at what other people are doing. And this came across, and I thought, well, that's really interesting. And looking at reviews, looking at what some other folks said about it that I have a lot of adoration for. I just thought, okay, I got to check a little bit more into this resource. So I'm looking at it, and I think it was about a week later, Pastor John and I were sitting there, and we were just talking about, again, resources. And I said, I have come across one that I'm kind of excited about. I think it was also just kind of in the season that we were in as a church and things that we were wrestling with personally as well as professionally and as a church. I thought, this is exactly what we need. He goes, man, it's funny. I've kind of found the same thing, and it was this.
Oh,
right?
Funny.
So both of us had kind of come across the same resource, and I was a little bit more into it at the moment. So I just dove straight in. I'd already gotten the book, and kind of already decided, hey, I want to dig deeper into the other resources.
Absolutely.
And so there's a couple of other books that go along with this as well that I've kind of dug into. And so, I mean, that's kind of the story of how I came across it, knowing that at some point I'm going to want to really bring this deeper into the life of Trinity Klein. And that's kind of where we've landed now after 2 years of now we're going to really kind of bring it's been a part of the things that I've been doing, but now how do we really introduce this to the congregation as a whole? And
with both of us having adult discipleship in our titles, I think it's really important that at this point, especially early on in this podcast, that we explain what that means, because discipleship can sometimes come off as sort of a churchy word. And when we talk about discipleship, what we really mean is that we're following Jesus.
Okay.
We are constantly learning from Jesus. We're imitating him, and we're looking to him in all things. And so one of the ways that we've talked about discipleship And how to define that on a really simple terms is 3 words. Let Jesus lead.
Yeah,
So
there you
that's
go.
kind of where the Jesus Lead podcast title even comes from. And we really want this to infiltrate every area of our life.
Yep.
Whether it's questions, our hopes, our doubts, our choices that we make day in and day out. We really want Jesus to be at the helm of our life, helping to guide us and help us to navigate some really crazy and difficult times and questions. And that includes our emotional health. And for some of you listening who might be going, I don't know about this book, emotional health.
Which is what most people have a reaction to.
Yeah, and why do you think we're tempted to have kind of an adverse reaction to this topic of emotional health mixed with spirituality?
That's a wonderful question. Why, I think that one, how about this? And I'm gonna hit another book,
Sure.
okay, that really kind of falls in the same category. That another book that has been very impactful for me is and some of you, and I don't know if we've talked about this, Donald Miller.
Mm-hmm.
If you know the author Donald Miller, he's written a lot of different books, but he wrote a book called Scary Close.
Mm.
And it's taking off the mask and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Which really falls in line with emotionally healthy spirituality. And the idea of, actually feeling,
Mm-hmm.
talking about feeling, we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And that is not something our sinful flesh wants us to do
Absolutely.
at all.
Yeah.
And so our sinful flesh says don't talk about that, don't feel that.
Mm-hmm. And so does our culture.
I know. I
right?
was just gonna say, culture, huge, big time.
Even within the church with the best intentions, right?
Absolutely, yes. And so when it comes to, again, just this idea of emotionally healthy, or even just talking about emotions, it's kind of negative connotation to it, and yet vulnerability is such a key component to our discipleship process, because when it comes to discipleship and letting Jesus lead, it means we also do have to drop the masks.
Yeah.
That's the language that Donald Miller would use to allow ourselves to become close with Jesus, which means we gotta bear our scars.
Yes.
Like we have to show them.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to talk about our hurts,
Yep.
talk about our hangups, talk about our shame,
Mm-hmm.
and allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And that is not something that comes to us very easy, especially males. Sorry, and I honestly, as men specifically, I know that as a pastor, I come across this all the time, that men, especially in moments of hurt, right, and in moments of brokenness and hurt, we are told we've got to be strong, right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be strong. We're not supposed to show weakness. And yet the truth is, we gotta, if we're honest, if we're vulnerable and honest, is, yeah, I hurt a lot.
Yep.
I have a lot of hurts, and I have a lot of grief, and I have a lot of past brokenness.
Yeah.
And if I can be honest about that, I'm going to be able to heal quicker.
Yeah.
And I'm also going to be able to form a deeper connection with Jesus as he heals, but a deeper connection with others as well, as I'm sharing my true self.
And we sometimes think that the Bible tells us not to be overly emotional or not to listen to our feelings because of some verses that do give us some instruction, right? Like, your heart, guard your heart. But also then the other one, don't trust your own heart, that your heart is deceitful, or that your heart can't be trusted because it is bent inward toward itself. So we have to kind of look at those verses in tension with one another, because if you pull a few verses here and there, you might see that and go, God says I shouldn't trust my feelings and that I just need to do what's right regardless of how I feel. But the reality that we see in the broader context of the entirety of Scripture is that God is moving in our emotions, good and bad, in order often to yank us out of a bad reality and call us into something different. And we see tons of emotions in Scripture, both from humans that Jesus is transforming and that he's asking to, he's challenging, but then also we see emotions in God himself, right? And that's something that this book hits on, that, if you're going, I don't know, emotionally healthy, I don't really know if this is what I want to, I would really just challenge you to, especially in this first chapter, take a look at the list of the times where it's described that God has various emotions and that he is a God of feeling, and he's created us with feelings for a purpose. And not all of our feelings are just mindless, ebbs and flows that are going to lead us to destruction. Some of them are to convict us and pull us back to him. Some of them are to say, hey, this world is broken. Don't long for it. Don't treasure it. Treasure heaven, right? So God is using a whole bunch of truth in our emotions. And we do need to test them.
Yeah, and our emotions, just adding one more layer to that, our emotions also cue us to something's not right.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. And this is where, again, the sinful flesh doesn't want us to deal with that which is wrong.
Yep.
If something's wrong, just disregard it, put it aside.
Shut the door. Yep.
Yeah. And not deal with it.
Yeah.
And whereas the emotion is actually God, this, again, as you said, is part of our creation.
Yeah.
And it's a positive thing to be able to sense something's not right. Let's put it on the table, right?
And examine it.
Let's deal with it, right? Let's figure out what is this that's wrong, and how do we process it? How do we move forward with it? And feel through it. So it's a big part of our spirituality.
Absolutely. And that brings us right into the beginning of this book, chapter 1. The subtitle for chapter 1 says, "Something is desperately wrong." And what's desperately wrong is when we try to sever spirituality and emotion. Because when we're trying to separate spirituality and our faith journey from our emotions, we are not allowing faith to get past the surface and into our core of who we are. Our emotions are a major component of who we are as people. And so one of the things that they, and you may have seen this if you've seen the front of the book, right on the cover is a picture of an iceberg. And, maybe you've picked up this little nugget of information about an iceberg, but at any time, if you're out in the ocean, if you see an iceberg, you're only ever seeing about 10%.
Correct.
90% of that iceberg is below the surface. And so the model that's put in front of us in chapter 1 is, it illustrates that, are you only transformed by Jesus on the surface? Are the parts of you that people see on the outside the parts that look Christian, while deep down beneath the surface you're remaining unchanged? Because feelings can be messy and ugly, and we can dwell in feelings. And yet we can put a mask on, like you said. If we're not dealing with our inner selves, and our feelings and our spirituality are not aligning, then what we end up with is kind of a surface level Christianity without deep change. We might be going through the motions and say, oh, I'm a lifelong Christian. I've been a Christian for 35 years. Well, and there's a great quote. He says, 22 years I had been a Christian, but I wasn't maturing as I should. I wasn't a 22-year-old Christian. I was a 1-year-old Christian 21 times. And so a lot of us, I think, we hit plateaus in our faith walk. And that's certainly what the devil would like, right? For us to not continue to grow and mature into the image of Christ, but to remain at a distance and sometimes to push us backwards, farther away from Jesus. But as we're following Jesus and letting him lead, we're called to be opening up every area of our life to Jesus. And you said that means opening the door to some stuff that maybe isn't pretty or maybe isn't comfortable.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, like on this iceberg model, there's kind of, I think there's two perspectives for you to consider when you look at this iceberg model. One is, again, if you're only allowing 10% of yourself to be seen, right? And think of it this way. This is one perspective. By the world, right? By the people that you associate with, the people that maybe the people you work with. We all have these different circles. I call them circles of influence that we reside in. we have our homes, we have our neighborhoods, we have our workplaces, we have our social circles, and then you have your church circle. And in all of those circles, though, maybe you're only allowing like 10% of yourself to be seen. And so in your church circle,
Mm.
you got your church hat on, and you're really, you're giving off the persona, or as going back to Donald Miller, the mask, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got your church mask on, and so that's what you're allowing everybody to see. Maybe it's this maybe it looks a little different home in your social circles, but that's all people are seeing. That's not you.
Mm.
And so you're not actually being honest about who you are in those settings. But I want to take it to a different perspective, which is, what about before God, right?
Ooh, yeah.
What about your relationship with Jesus? Are you only sharing, not that he can't see the whole
Right.
thing. He
Right.
he knows, and by the way, yes, he sees it all. He knows
Mm-hmm.
everything about you. But maybe in your mind, between you and Jesus, you're only being honest with him about that 10%
Mm.
as well. And if that's the case, then that's where the spiritual maturity piece is impossible. And so
Yeah.
when we're talking about being emotionally healthy, it's just being honest about
Mm.
ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And so first off, before God,
Yeah.
in your relationship with Jesus, he already knows everything.
Mm-hmm.
So bear everything before him
Yeah.
so that he can walk with you, because he's already there in order to bring healing,
Yeah.
bring restoration, bring grace, forgiveness, love, wholeness, new life into you.
Yeah.
And but then that will also empower you to also begin to reveal that iceberg. Now listen, don't go revealing the whole iceberg to your
To
neighbor.
anybody,
Don't
yeah,
don't
just
do
not anybody on
don't
the
just go, "Okay,
street.
this is what I gotta do. I just
Yeah.
gotta start bearing it." No. But certainly, like, I mean, how about with your spouse? What are
Mm.
the things that are underneath, surface level irritations, brokenness, maybe even
Fear.
fear,
Yeah.
things that your spouse may not even be aware of because you're just kind of hiding it. Well, that's a place where like Jesus, you can begin to bear it all, because it should be
Mm.
formed and shaped in love and for grace and forgiveness, and that's a place where you can become more spiritually mature in those relationships. But as you grow, though, the idea is, as you heal and you grow in your relationship with Jesus, that you're given the ability to
Mm.
again take off the masks in those other circles and begin to become real and honest about who you are as one
Yeah.
who is being led by Jesus.
And that's a beautiful thing. I want to share two thoughts that I have on that topic of letting down the mask. One is something that Pastor Lee has come to say over and over, which is Jesus did not die on the cross to change you from a bad person to a good person,
Correct.
right? He didn't come just so that you'd start attending church and stop swearing and, like whatever. That the actions, the outward part is not the focus for Jesus. Instead, he died and rose again to take you from death to life. And so if you are wearing a mask and only letting Jesus in on that surface level on those outward actions, then you're not living a full life where you can freely and comfortably and joyously lean into the love and the grace that he has for you that's supposed to carry you through every day. It makes me think of if you've ever seen the Skit Guys,
Okay.
a fun group, just two guys, and they do these little Christian
Yep.
skits back and forth. And one of my favorite ones, one of the maybe most impactful ones for me, is one where one of them is God as a sculptor, and the other one is a human being.
Okay.
And so the character who's portraying God, he has a chisel and a hammer, and he says, "I want to mold you, human being, into my image." And so the human is like, "Oh, okay, hey, all right, well, I'm all right if you want to take away this thing that I don't like. You can chisel that right away. And
Mm.
oh, and while you're at it, could you make me more like this?" And and the God character just says to me, says, "You let me work, right? You need to let me chisel where I need to chisel. And it's not going to be comfortable,
Mm.
but I'm making you into my image, and I'm the sculptor." And so, yeah, when we don't let God into some of areas of our life, like, "Oh, Lord, can I just keep my guilty pleasures? can I just keep my bitterness and keep this wall up between me and this other person? Some of those things that we want to hang on to, God is asking us to release so that we can be blessed by it, but then also that His glory can be shown in the restoration work that He's doing. Because God's glory isn't diminished by our sin. And I think, it isn't diminished by our brokenness. His perfection, His righteousness, His love is magnified when we can experience it and when it's put on display in us, these weak, broken vessels. And so when we don't want to appear broken, when we avoid vulnerability at all costs, we're not only losing out ourselves, but we're not allowing God to display His transformative love and grace and power through us for the other broken people in the world. And they're just going to keep wearing masks, and they're just going to keep being distanced from
Yeah.
the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, just so that you understand, like, this is about discipleship. And discipleship, again, is someone who lets Jesus lead. But in order for us to have that deep connection with Jesus, we have to be able to let down the walls in order to let Him come in and do this,
do this work.
restorative process. But that changes us, right?
Yeah.
That again, makes us alive in Him and through Him, and that change begins to impact our life and all those other circles of influence that I talked about earlier.
It has that outward ripple effect.
Yep, totally.
Right?
I mean, and that's what we want. That's what you should want for yourself. It's what we want for you. It's what I want for myself. It's what I want for my family, for those that are around me. And it's what we want for you as well, is this deep connection of Jesus to where He begins to lead every aspect of your life, and that ripple effect that just has impact in all of those circles of influence that you live in.
Yes, and this is a journey that's not going to be completed until Jesus returns, right? And
Unfortunately, that's the truth.
So
Yes.
this is one of those things where
you don't get there.
Yeah, you don't get
You
there
don't
this
get
side
there.
of heaven. So this isn't
Right.
something where we're saying 6 weeks and we'll have
and
you
then you're
turned
gonna
into
be suddenly
mature.
the perfect Christian. No.
No. This is a process, but when you're disengaged from the process, you're stagnant. And we want you to experience that fullness of life.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so true.
Yeah.
When we disengage from that connection to Jesus, being with Jesus, which we'll talk about at some point, but when we disengage, everything's going to become our relationship with Jesus is going to become stagnant, and that's going to have a negative impact on everything else.
Nothing is neutral, right? Nothing stays neutral. And that's kind of an unfortunate thing that we sort of feel is true, but really isn't. And when it comes to faith, the devil wants you to say, "Oh, you've arrived. That's good enough." When in reality, Jesus is going, "No, I have so much more to show you of my love, and so much more to teach you." And that's a good thing.
And not just that, but as I was thinking about it a minute ago, we also just have the context of lives that are always changing. I mean,
you're in a new season right now that you weren't in 2 years ago, I guarantee.
Oh, totally. But then tomorrow, you might be hit with bad news.
Yeah.
And if you are disengaged from a relationship with Jesus, that bad news is going to impact you, or it's going to affect you in a much different way than if you have a deep connection with Jesus. And if you're engaged, then that brokenness or whatever it is, just anything that happens, life happens, right?
Sure does.
Life happens. Let's have Jesus leading us as life happens. Because if Jesus isn't leading us, then we're ill-equipped to face the challenges of this life. And there's always going to be challenges.
Okay.
Always.
So now I'm interested. I'm like, okay, I think I might want to get this book. I want to get involved in this.
No, you do want to get the
listen.
book.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
But I'm going, how do I know where I'm unhealthy or how I might be spiritually unhealthy? And that just sounds a little crazy. 2 things. One is that you can actually take an assessment. If you go to emotionallyhealthy.org, you can take an assessment to help you decide, okay, how mature am I spiritually at this point in my life?
I remember when I
remember taking
listen.
it too.
Yeah, okay.
It's a little, talk about vulnerable, right?
Well, sure.
And the categories that you can get are, you can get emotional and spiritual infant,
Oh, yeah.
or
No, yeah,
an
right.
adolescent,
Yeah,
or an adult, or
yeah.
I think there's even one in between, but it's or yeah, and then like so you might find that in some categories
Oh, you're a total infant.
you're a little baby
Yeah,
and you got a
pastor,
lot of room to
pastor,
grow. Oh yeah,
totally. I
me
mean,
too.
yeah, it is a great assessment because it was,
Yes.
and it wasn't in a bad way. I say that
No.
eh, I I was an infant in some categories, and I went, yeah, totally,
Yep.
totally.
Yeah.
But seeing it helps you also go, okay, I don't want to stay there,
No.
right?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to stay there. I
Yeah.
want to be emotionally and spiritually mature
Mm-hmm.
as a follower of Jesus. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's this assessment that you can take. But additionally, as you're looking through this first chapter, there are listed 10 signs or symptoms of emotionally unhealthy spirituality. So, ways that we can lack maturity, patterns of thinking, and patterns of behavior that can indicate that we're not being fully honest, that we're being surface level with the Lord and maybe with the people around us as well.
Yep.
And so there are 10 symptoms, and we're going to kind of briefly touch on all 10. Um, and then that way, as you're listening, just kind of think, is this me? Maybe is this somebody that I'm close to potentially? Because I don't want you to be pointing the finger at somebody else.
No, this is
But
about you.
this is about you. But sometimes you can go, oh, I know what that looks like because
Okay,
I've
sure.
seen it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fair.
And so that
Absolutely.
might be a baby step toward seeing it in yourself. Sometimes it's a little harder to see it in yourself.
Sure.
But we need to really, again, start to be honest with ourselves. So the very first one is using God to run from God. That's a symptom of emotionally unhealthy spirituality. Can you unpack what that means for us?
Oh, yeah, I don't know that I can unpack it
Okay.
necessarily, but I will. Here's what I will say. Um, I do. It's funny we say it's supposed to be about me, not you, but I do see this
Sure.
quite often in people who are literally running from having to deal with
Mm,
something in their lives, whether it's a shame, whether it's a brokenness, rather than deal with that, will pour themselves into doing, right,
okay. Okay.
being the busyness of church, which here we're two church workers who understand that the church is an incredibly busy place,
Yeah.
but it's also easy to get wrapped up in that busyness, so much so
Yeah.
that if I have an issue in my own life, right,
Mm,
again, maybe it's a brokenness, maybe it's a shame, maybe it's a relationship.
yeah. Something that's
Maybe I've got something going on with a relationship. I just don't want to deal with that, and so I have so much other stuff to be doing over here
that
for the
appears
church.
spiritual. Yes. Yes.
Totally
Yeah.
appear because it is,
Yeah.
especially if it's doing in the church, then it looks like, I'm a good Christian. Being a good pastor.
I'm in a
Uh,
good place. Yeah.
but what's really happening is I've got this thing
Mm,
and I don't want to deal with it.
mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to pour myself into this over here
Yeah.
and not deal with it. And
Yeah.
in the book, part of that he talks about was his relationship with his wife, was a
Yeah.
piece of that. They had brokenness,
Right.
decades ago, and he couldn't deal with it because he had so much busyness as a pastor in a
Absolutely.
church. So
Yes. And
it's easy to do them.
yeah, and again, it looks like he's a man of God, and it
Yep.
looks like he's a man of integrity because he's spending his life in the church and leading people to Jesus. And yet, one of the most important relationships in his life, the one to his wife, was suffering. It was
Oh,
suffocating.
it was on life support.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, and even in this very first chapter, I love this about Peter Scazzero. He's very vulnerable with the reader.
vulnerable.
He is modeling for us what's so difficult for
Correct.
us to do often. But he right away in the first chapter talks about the first time that his wife confronted him and said she was done.
Yeah.
Because she said, if you're the leader of a church and this is how our marriage is looking and this is how the reality of our life and our relationship is, I wouldn't follow you. I
Yeah.
wouldn't go to your church. And God used this moment of major pain to really kick him in the pants, to say, you think you're serving me, but you have not been transformed, and it inside where I need you to be transformed to
hmm
make a deeper impact, and it's hurting the people around you. But this first symptom is very hard to discern. Because again, it can look so good on the outside, and only you and the Lord are going to know if you're doing this. But I think a lot of times where I see it either in myself or maybe even in the people around me is I'm always attending Bible study. I'm always doing this or that. I'm volunteering. I'm doing these
Involved
other
in
things.
all these things.
And so if that's you,
Not
I
that
would
that's
just,
a bad
not
thing.
that that's a bad
It's
thing,
not a bad thing.
but this is a tricky one to discern. So if that's you, maybe just take a moment to assess, are there some areas of life where you feel are very heavy and negative and that you don't want to be around? And is this potentially, are these spiritual areas where you're attempting to compensate or cover up for something that's hurtful that you don't want to deal with? Because that might be a good way to kind of see, oh, hey, I love serving, I love volunteering, I love going to Bible study, but I really hate being at my home because I'm lonely.
Okay, so I'm going to pause there because notice what you just said there was an emotion. Right? I hate being at home.
Yeah.
Now,
Where your heavy emotions.
And here's the thing: you may not say it like that, right? But is that what you're feeling? Like I got to be at church because the church needs me, and they have all of this stuff, and I'm involved in all of this.
I'm needed. I'm wanted.
So emotionally healthy is being honest with yourself and going, okay, I'm gonna say to myself, like, I don't like being at home. Like, that's emotion, y'all. Why don't you? So now you need to begin, that's getting under the surface now of the iceberg. And begin to unpack that. Okay, so am I just consuming myself with the doing for God because I have this emotion?
Yeah.
And now I can call it that. I can, here's this emotion. I hate being at home. Okay.
Yeah.
That's big. Like,
yeah.
you need to unpack that. Now, I'm not saying, Melanie, that's you. I'm saying
my example is going to get me in trouble.
It's a great example of, okay, you may not even realize there's an emotion. And this is what emotionally healthy spirituality is really about, combining those
tuning
two.
into what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's explore that second symptom. It says ignoring anger, sadness, and fear. And again, I don't want to put guys on the hook here, but as you shared earlier, I think sometimes sadness and fear in particular are very difficult, especially for men to express. And I have seen that in men in my own life, that they're taught, like you can't be the one to show fear. You have to be the stronghold of your family.
And as you said earlier, there's guys that can pull out scripture that says, well, Jesus says, do not be
fear.
afraid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Pull it out of context.
Right.
Pulling out, that's not what he's talking about there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, no, absolutely right. These are negative emotions that, again, it's right for men. We're not supposed to be afraid. Not supposed to feel sadness, right? And those things. We got to be strong. But yet, we also have to also acknowledge that it's just Satan sitting on the shoulder, right? Saying those things, whether you're a man or a woman.
Yeah.
That these negative emotions, put them to the side. It's even just like the example you said, hate. That's a negative emotion that, I don't want to.
I'm going to paper over it with something else. Yeah.
I don't want to.
Well, and even like anger, I think about that. And, if something in my life goes wrong and I might be really feeling like I want to be angry with God, but I feel like I am not allowed to be. Right? So then I try and stuff that feeling down and I maybe don't express it because I don't think it's God-pleasing. Or I think it indicates something about my lack of spiritual maturity. This book is going to open your eyes and show you a little different way of looking at it, that you can tune into that and examine that and explore that and express that even. Because anger is there to indicate something. And often what are we angry about? We're angry about the things that happen in this world that are awful. And you know what? God's angry about those too.
And the thing about like anger, I mean, again, you can't control it. Like, you're going to be angry. You're going to feel angry.
That it will happen to you.
You can deny it, but it's still there. And again, it's not necessarily negative. It's always, why am I angry?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I mean, especially with our kids. Okay, and this is the Jesus Lead podcast, not to raise them up.
Yeah.
But how often do our kids make us angry?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so. We can become very reactionary in our anger, whether it's kids, whether it's whatever it is. But how can we pause?
Yeah.
And one, what am I feeling? I'm feeling anger. Why am I angry? And
Mm.
just think through it for a moment, and then it allows Jesus to step in. It allows us to actually then take control
Yeah.
of that emotion and use it for good.
Rather than it controlling us,
Correct.
right?
Absolutely.
And Scripture does not want us to allow emotions to dictate our lives and our state of well-being all the time. Like that's not what we're talking
No.
about. But to examine our emotions, to allow them to have their proper place.
Correct.
Right? Because there's a proper place for our
Yes.
emotions, just as there's a proper place and a proper way that our physical body should be interacting and behaving and taking care of ourselves. God is asking us to do the same thing with our emotions.
Yep.
Okay. Number 3, symptoms of unhealthy spirituality. Dying to the wrong things. This one blew my mind.
Yeah.
The
Tell me
first
why.
time. Well, when you think about being a Christian, sometimes you think that your life's going to get a whole lot easier, which is not true.
Mhm.
And other times you think that, well, now that I'm a Christian, I have to bear my cross. And
Yeah.
in bearing my cross, sometimes I think I'm not allowed to feel joy, or I'm not allowed to just sit and rest and delight in things, or because I need to not be vain, I can never be proud of something that I made, or like there's just so much there that
Yeah.
it's like we go off the deep end.
Mhm.
And it's almost, I don't want to go too, with big theology words, but it's like monasticism,
Oh.
where you're like, you're beating yourself up because you think, oh, I can't be enjoying this part of
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
that
I mean,
much.
that's kind of the idea here, is that for whatever reason, suddenly I'm a Christian and I've got to be a martyr. I'm supposed to suffer and bear my cross,
Yeah.
and so there's no place for joy. There's
Yeah.
no place for it's dying to the wrong things, where he talks about dying to joy, dying to gladness, dying to and I love
Beauty.
beauty and
Yeah.
art and creation,
Delicious
and I
food, or,
can't
yeah.
yeah, I can't appreciate, it's yeah, that's
Laughter.
dying to those wrong things by taking on this martyrdom suffering.
That just isn't in
You pointed to,
Scripture.
but right,
Yeah.
monasticism, where I've got to just disassociate myself from everything in the world because everything in the world is just bad. It's like, no, there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that God has given us in the creation
Yeah.
for us to find joy. And
And he even commands for us to have a day to take some of that in,
Sure.
right? Every week.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, and we'll explore this potentially in a little more detail, but dying to the wrong things. Like, I remember a big portion of adolescence and into my college years of really wrestling with this, particularly as a woman, because I'm like, Jesus, defines beauty. And I don't want to get sucked into the world's definition of beauty. And so I'm going to go way to the other side, and I'm going to start looking down on people for wearing too much makeup or spending too much on their clothes because they shouldn't be, and it was like this very weird, self-righteous kind of thing where I'm like, I'm going to die to the world standard of beauty, but really I just died to having any sense of joy in my own appearance and the way that God made me.
And what's funny is I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm wondering how emotionally, I mean, you were
Yeah.
emotionally probably in a
Terrible
really
place.
bad place.
Terrible
Yeah.
place. And looking back on it, I'm like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
there was so much there that was out of whack. And it took a long time, and it took some digging, and it took a whole lot of vulnerability with the Lord to kind of move through that. But plenty there to unpack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Symptom number 4 is denying the impact of the past on the present. Ooh. If you are the kind of person like Timon and Pumbaa, Hakuna Matata, no worries, it's whatever, leave the past behind you.
Good luck.
You're in denial.
Yes,
You're in denial.
totally. Yep.
And that's exactly what the symptom says. It's your past impacts your present. And whether it's your past and the things that have happened to you, or the things that you've done, or your family history, or circumstances in the world, as you're growing up, or even the effects of a pandemic on your life, or the loss of a job, or any of those things. If you're saying, oh, the past has no bearing on the present, that's just patently not true.
Yeah, I really talk about this a lot in my own teaching and in my
Yeah.
own, like, when I'm just doing one-on-one discipleship with folks. But I do what's called a life plan, and where we kind of track out the history of our life,
Yeah.
these significant moments. We call them life turns, or how about
Mhm.
this Donald Miller thing again? But these life turns, which are very true, that, depending on your age, you've had
Mm,
these significant life turns. Some of them are really high, and some of them are very low.
mm.
But those life turns are moments that, whatever it was that took place, life is never the same going forward. So, big
Yes.
ones are like marriage.
Sure.
Like, that's
Yeah.
a life turn. Everything going forward is going to be totally different than the past, but it's also going to impact everything going forward. So,
Yeah.
you can look at these life turns and see, yes, how they shaped, but to deny them
Yeah.
and their impact on the present, and how you approach
How you
things
process
today
things. Yep.
is, I mean, ridiculous. They
Yeah.
do. I mean, for me, and again, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I have a life impact for me that took place when I was probably about 7 years old. It impacts today.
Today. Yeah.
Everything,
Oh, yeah.
the way that I filter everything, the way that I
Mm.
approach everything is because of that
Yeah.
life turn that happened when I was 7 years old. So,
And
yeah,
let me ask you this, just to highlight the importance of not denying it. It was impacting you, whether you acknowledged it or not.
correct.
But once you started to realize and
Oh,
make the
sure. No.
connection,
Yeah.
how did that impact? Was it helpful?
Oh,
You know what I
I mean,
mean?
no, 100%, because it also helped me. I know I know that moment
Yep.
impacts how I process everything today.
Yep.
I'm not thinking about that moment today,
No.
but yet the realization of knowing what that moment did, and everything, that
Yeah.
followed afterwards, knowing how that impacted me then,
Yeah.
it has shaped and molded me to who I am today and how I think about things. So I'm cognizant of it
Yes.
when certain things happen. I'm cognizant of, okay, I'm processing it from because of
From that
that. Yeah, from that
perspective.
thing.
And that's why I'm feeling this way in the moment. And now I can move through this
Hmm.
without allowing that to put undue stress or pressure or, impact. But it has its rightful place too,
Yep,
right? So we've acknowledged it. I
absolutely.
love that. That we could talk about that one all day long, I
We
think.
could, and I actually, yes, I
I mean,
can.
I can think
I
of several
can.
things too where I'm like, yep,
Yep,
that was a life turn.
yep,
And once I figured it out, it was like ping, 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 all these things fall into place. And I go, that's why this was a struggle. That's why this relationship was such a pain. Or
yep.
that's why I felt this way for so long.
Hmm.
So it's very freeing. It's very freeing
So
to be able
this
to
is
look at
just
this.
for you. Like, I've done this with people one on one.
Yeah.
Contact me. I love walking people through
Yes.
these life turns because it is so. Oh,
Oh,
wow! I've never talked about that moment, and I've never realized the
yeah.
impact that it has on me still today. So
It's huge.
reach
Yep.
out to me.
And again, this is we want Jesus to be able to go deeper under the surface
Yep.
because it can be so life-giving and transformative.
Yep.
All right. Symptom 5, dividing life into secular, which just means non-churchly, and sacred, which means set apart, holy, churchy things, into those two compartments. So dividing life into secular and sacred compartments. This to me is like your typical go to church on Sunday,
Yeah.
check the box.
Check the
On Monday
box.
morning, I'm sharing dirty jokes by the water cooler
Back
or,
at it.
or
Yep.
whatever.
Right
Just
back into the world.
back in the
Yep.
routine. I'm checking the boxes
Not
saying,
letting Jesus lead.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying I think I'm doing the bare minimum or what I think he requires of me. I'm
Mhm.
doing those things, but he doesn't get to say what I watch on TV. He doesn't get to say he doesn't get to have leadership or ownership over the jokes I make or the, just different things like that. So, yeah, compartmentalizing things and saying, "Oh, who I am at church looks very different than who I am on Friday night."
And I think a majority of Christians really fall into this
It's
category,
easy.
whether or not they realize it or not. And
Yeah.
maybe as you're listening, you're going, "Oh yeah, I." But the whole point isn't to shame or guilt, but
No.
to go, yeah. So you're emotionally unhealthy. You're emotionally and spiritually unhealthy. So recognize that and go, okay, I don't want to
Oh,
do that.
yeah. And
What do
hey,
we do?
who did Jesus come to serve? Those who are sick, who are
That's
unhealthy,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is why he's here. He wants to, he doesn't want you to have a faith life and then the rest of your life.
Yep.
Right? He wants to be in all of it. Number 6, doing for God instead of being with God. And this, we've kind of already touched on some of this, and a lot of these symptoms you're going to see more than one, and they're going to kind of layer together, overlap in different ways. They might lead to one or the other. But doing for God instead of being God ties back to that first symptom.
It does to a degree, yeah.
To a degree,
Yeah.
because sometimes we can busy ourselves with the things that we think are healthy and spiritually mature, like Bible study, or like tons of volunteering, or like spending our life for in ministry, and then we think that we're doing it all
Mhm.
and we've got it.
So this is one that kind of sucked me in deeper into this emotionally healthy spirituality and really getting a little bit deeper into it. There's a phrase that he says. And I'm not even sure if it's in this particular book, but it's certainly in. Again, he has some of the other books, but eh, what we do for God matters.
Mm.
Who we are matters more. Like what we do
Yeah.
matters. What you do matters, but who you are matters more. Now think about that. And so this is the key difference between that one and this one is the first one isn't about being right. It's just about doing, but we're doing so that we're avoiding this other thing over here.
Yeah.
This one is about that we're doing and doing and doing because that's what we feel like we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
And
Right.
what's missing is the being with God component. And
The resting in him.
this,
And
so y'all, this is where it all lands with emotionally healthy spirituality. Is at its core, you're going to discover that the biggest priority here has nothing to do with doing at all.
Yep.
It's all about being with God, so that He has a deep connection to you. You have a deep connection with them, and then that feeds into your doing. So again, doing what we do matters, but who we are matters even more.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time we aren't who we are created and called and made alive to be.
Yeah.
If we only did, if we
Yeah.
were with God, and allowed ourselves to be with God, oh, how life would change.
And just to illustrate this a bit deeper, because I think, like we said, there's some similarities between symptom 1 and symptom 6, but I really like the examples that are given here. Here are just some of the false beliefs that people are operating on when they think they need to be doing for God instead of being with God. It's sort of the Mary Martha complex, right? Mary sits at the feet of Jesus, and what she does is more important than Martha at that point, because that's what Mary's doing that's going to cause deep transformational change. Dishes aren't going to do that. A meal isn't going to do that. But spending time with Jesus is going to be the deep and lasting eternal change that's necessary. Anyway, so here's some examples of the false messages that we believe about our doing for God. Doing lots of work for God is a sign of growing spirituality. Ooh, it sounds right.
It does sound right.
But it's not,
No,
right?
it's not.
Because think about the Pharisees, right? Do for God, do all these things to show your spirituality, and yet Jesus was harder on them than anybody else. It's all up to you, and you'll never finish while you're alive on earth, so keep on going, right? With every breath I have, I will serve the Lord.
And if I don't do it, who's going to do it, right?
Yeah.
How will it get done?
Yeah, and that kind of feeds into another one. You are responsible to share Christ around you at all times, or people will go to hell. As though we're that powerful, that our inaction is going to send a person to hell.
And that all of a sudden we've put ourselves in the place of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Because I don't change anyone's heart. Only the Holy Spirit can do that.
You got it.
And so it's not my responsibility to save someone.
Yeah.
That's Jesus' responsibility. He's using me to share.
Right. And again, what you do matters.
But I can only share, and I can only do out of my being with God.
Yeah. So it says, are all these things, all these false messages, are they totally wrong? No, but work for God that is not nourished by a deep interior life with
Yeah,
God
there you go.
will eventually be contaminated by other things, such as our ego, power, approval from others, all that other stuff.
Yeah.
That's just a good one. We could spend so much time on all of these, but we're going to hurry through.
Well,
Spiritualizing away conflict is symptom number 7. Spiritualizing away conflict. Like, man, it sounds good. I'm just not going to let it bother me that this other person did something wrong, or that there's this conflict here, but because we're family, we're just not going to talk about it.
correct.
I just have to let it go because that's what God would want me to do.
And so again, we're washing away the
Ooh.
emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one I did struggle with just a little bit because of that reality, but it is so true how often we fall prey to sweeping things under the rug because,
That's
geez,
the Christian thing to
it's the
do.
Christian thing to do. This person hurt me, but I'm just going to let it go
Yeah.
because that would be
Yeah.
the Christian loving thing to do. And it's kind of like, okay, but you're still angry, right? Like
Yeah.
you're still gonna, and you're probably gonna it's gonna fester and fester and fester.
Well, and
and you're not being honest.
that person in your relationship and the dynamics aren't going to change unless
Correct.
you address it.
Yep.
And so then you're putting on a mask of false peace when you haven't actually gone through the process to achieve real peace with that person.
Correct.
And that the same thing with like Jesus. Jesus doesn't want us to have a false peace that we have to slap it on our face every day and grit our teeth and that's not. No, he wants a peace that can restore a broken relationship, not paper over it.
Yeah.
Right?
So think about it this way, just to give you an idea, if you fall into this category, is there a person that you're avoiding? Like maybe you
might not be able to see me, but I'm raising my hand. Yeah.
but maybe you walk into church and you see them and you turn to go another way so that you can totally avoid them.
Or the
And
office or the, whatever.
or wherever. And that's the pattern. Guess what? That's because you're being emotionally and spiritually unhealthy.
Yeah.
That's the point of this.
Yep. And you might see symptoms of this that are a little bit, maybe a little bit not as pretty, right? Like sometimes we come at it and we're like, oh, I just will never say anything. Other times our emotions cause us to avoid the person entirely, but still not treat them well.
Yeah.
Right? So like we could spiritualize away conflict by pretending that there's peace when there's not, or we can just avoid that person and then we end up giving people the silent treatment. We can get sarcastic.
Yes.
We can say one thing to their face and something else behind their back. And right, so we can start to see how this really isn't a healthy way of functioning because we haven't dealt with the negative feelings that exist and we haven't created a new dynamic in the relationship or restored what's been broken.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of covering up what's been broken, that's symptom number 8, covering over brokenness, weakness, and failure. The pressure to present an image of ourselves as strong and spiritually together hovers over most of us. Yeah. How many of us feel as though we have to appear like we have it all together?
Again, the mask, right?
Yep,
We put on the mask, like I've got it all together.
Yeah, and if I show weakness, then maybe that somehow reflects badly on Jesus, or maybe then I won't be trusted to share what I know about him. Like we think that we have to have it all put together in order to make an impact on the people around us, or at least not to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so messing up, man, I can remember as a teacher, like this was real as a teacher. It definitely is real as a Christian as well. But I was a mean substitute before I got my teaching job because I was like, I can't be wrong, and I so afraid of needed to have control. And so it was not always pretty because I felt like I had to be perfect and I had to be perceived this way, or else all heck was going to break loose.
Yeah.
And we do this in our Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
We do this in our careers. We do this in our parenting. This can happen a lot. And so if you're seeing it and you're never allowed to be broken or to express, I messed up, I don't have this figured out, I can't handle this, if those phrases are not anywhere in your vocabulary or you're terrified to let them out, then maybe this one is for you, right?
That's very true.
Yeah, it's a good one. Ooh, how about this one? Number 9, living without limits. What does this look like? How is this unhealthy, and what does it look like to actually live without limits?
I don't know how to say no.
Mm.
Right. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's certainly a big piece of it. I think it
Yeah.
ties in. It also ties into 1 and 6, which turns into busyness and doing and
Yeah.
doing, doing. And so I don't have any boundaries in place, and I will put myself in a position to be used and abused by my own self and by
Mm.
others. And it's just going to turn into an emotional train
Yeah.
wreck.
And if I'm not honest with myself, I will start to place the burdens of everybody on me, and then I just have to go, go, go forever, and I can't drop, I can't break, I can't say no, like you said. Um, but we almost become our own idols when we live without limits.
Mm,
We start to be the ones that have to hold everything together and
correct.
keep everything, keep everything moving. Um,
And pride and fear can have a place that where that becomes a reality, like being, because I've got to look good. I've got to, maybe I think I'm the only one that can get it done, or I'm afraid if
yeah.
I don't do it, it won't get done.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to say yes to everything because I'm Superman,
Yeah.
right? I'm the spiritual
Right.
pastoral Superman.
Or if God has put this in front of me, which is what I think, then I need to do it. And that's not necessarily the case,
It's
right?
probably not the case.
Not everything in front of you is something that God is asking you to deal with.
Yeah, and recognize Satan's watching and goes, "Oh, this, yeah." So
Mhm.
they'll think this is God putting it before them, but it's actually me. And 'cause I
Okay.
know, yeah.
So a phrase that it just keeps coming up in like every area of my life for the past couple of years is this one that, Lord, help me to know the difference between right and wrong. But the prayer usually probably more likely should be, Lord, teach me the difference between right and almost right.
Mm,
Whoa.
unpack
Right?
that.
So what does it mean? Like right and wrong, sometimes that's really obvious. Should I punch them in the face? Probably not. Like I'm angry.
Sure, yeah,
But bottling up my feelings and saying nothing when this person has blatantly hurt me is also not right. It's
correct.
almost right, but it's still wrong, right?
Yeah,
it's like, so
yeah.
it
No, it's
seems
still,
right,
yeah.
but it's actually not the fullness of what God has intended
Well,
for
that's
his
good.
people.
Yeah,
I just love that phrase. But when I think about living without limits, it's like, I think it's good. I think it's right to, to pursue the excellence of life and try to do things to the best that I can. But if I'm running myself ragged or avoiding relationships and I'm having no calm and stillness, I'm having no, just genuine unscheduled interactions with my kids, like that's where it's sounds right, but it really
yeah,
isn't,
not
right? We're missing it.
correct.
So living without limits, this is one where, I can't go to church because son's got baseball on Sundays and we've got this and that and this and that. Or I can't take a vacation. I
Mhm.
can't rest. I can't, I can't just sit with my kids and cuddle them on the couch because I might feel guilty for the wasted time. And it sounds right,
But
but
not
it's
right.
not right.
Yeah.
And the last symptom number 10, judging other people's spiritual journey. So easy.
I'm not guilty of that at all.
Well, and even like I shared earlier about, my own struggle with dying to the wrong things, with dying to a sense of beauty, it was so easy for me to tack this one on there too.
Yep.
I died to the wrong things,
Sure.
and then I judged everybody who wasn't dying to the same things that I was.
Oh wow, yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm like,
absolutely.
oh, she spent
So
more than this
suddenly
on her.
you're
yeah.
the better. At least I'm better. I'm a better Christian than them.
I
Like
can't believe.
I'm in all of these Bible
Yeah.
studies, so
Yeah.
I've definitely got it together more than them because I don't see them in any of the Bible
Well,
studies.
and I can't believe that they still drink. Or,
Oh,
or
yeah,
like,
yeah, sure,
how
sure.
could they possibly go see that movie? Or
Yeah.
how could they, and we just assign, our like, we are the bar. And we place people like above or below us. And that's not for us to compare at all.
And that is emotionally and spiritually immature.
immature,
Yeah.
yes. Just as we would tell our children, if they're pointing out, well, Johnny did this wrong, or sister said this, and I did this, and I was better at this, then just as we would call that immaturity in children, when we do it to other people's spirituality, we might think that we're proving our maturity by saying, see, at least I don't do that. But Jesus has a great example of this too, when he's got the guy who thinks he's got it all together and the tax collector who are praying in the synagogue, and the guy is saying, I'm so glad I'm not that tax collector over there. And Jesus is going, ugh, he's got a mask on. If he'd remove that mask.
Well, and think about it. What was it? The tax collector was being vulnerable.
Vulnerable,
right?
Yes. He was emotional.
He was emotionally being vulnerable.
He beat his chest and he said,
have mercy on me, a sinner.
This is the rawness. This is the real.
I'm going to be honest about all of my brokenness before you, God. And whereas, the Pharisees like, I got it all together.
I got it all together. And
I got my mask on.
Me,
Me, I'm perfect.
And so when we say Jesus lead, we're looking at this book by Peter Scazzero, but he's doing what we are hoping to do, which is to allow Jesus to lead even our emotions, which sometimes can be an uncomfortable topic, but an absolutely critical one to full personhood.
Yeah, in order to be spiritually mature, we have to be emotionally vulnerable and emotionally mature as well.
And it takes a lot, and it's going to be a fun ride, and we really do hope that you join us. So again, pick up the book by Peter Scazzero, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. You can check out emotionallyhealthy.org for some additional information for another podcast.
Take the assessment.
Podcasts are your jam. Yep, take the assessment to see where you're an infant and where you're an adolescent and where you might be really mature.
You don't have to share it with anyone, but if you really want to be emotionally vulnerable, maybe
that would be cool.
You do.
Share it with somebody you trust, right?
Yeah.
And I think, should we share a little bit about one of our areas next time as an
that's
incentive,
a good idea.
right?
I have no problem with that.
I have no problem with that either.
Yeah,
So
I'll bring my infancy in front of everyone.
To the table.
Yeah.
And we'll examine it because we're all a work in progress.
Totally.
And Jesus is the faithful one. He's the one that we trust to do the work. And he has done the work on the cross, but he's also continuing to just reveal more of his goodness. In us, to us, through us. It's awesome. He's
us
good.
Alive.
And that's why we can let him lead.
Yes.
He is good. So next time, join us for chapter 2. And we hope that you have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time.